Hello and welcome to an overview of VELA microboards and individualized funding. VELA is a BC-based nonprofit who was developed in 1990. We serve people with any disability of any age and their networks across the province free of charge. We work alongside people with disabilities who wish to lead self-directed lives through the formation of either a microboard or by accessing individualized funding. A microboard is a network of support for a person with a disability, enabling that person to choose how they want to live their life and how their funds and services are managed. Microboards provide that person with the opportunity to live a self-directed, independent lifestyle, supported by those that know and love them. We have a short video that we have developed on an overview of microboards.
What is a VELA microboard? It all starts with a person with a disability and those that know and love them. Together, they meet with a VELA facilitator to take the steps to incorporate as a nonprofit. Each board member plays a role in assisting the person to achieve a self-directed life. The microboard members all work together to connect the person to their community in ways that make sense for them. The microboard can choose to directly manage any available funding by signing a contract with their funder. This allows the microboard to become the employer and hire their own staff, and gives the microboard the ability to customize supports to the person's needs. Every microboard looks a little bit different because every person at the center of the microboard is different. All VELA microboards have the support of VELA staff available to help them create, set up, maintain, and change the supports they provide through their microboards.
So a microboard in its simplest form is a small group of at least 5 family and friends who join together with a person with a disability to form a simple nonprofit society under the Societies Act of British Columbia. These people come together because of their relationship with the person at the center and volunteer their time and energy to sit on the microboard. The microboard then, as a group, can also choose to access any available government funding to create customized supports for the individual. It is not a route to access new funding that isn't already available. At the core of what makes a microboard is this set of guiding principles. These are what the group uses as they come together to establish and maintain their microboard. The first principle is that all microboard members must establish and maintain a personal relationship with the person for whom the board is created. They don't need to have a deep relationship with that individual when they join, but as part of their joining, they must commit to forming a relationship as time goes on. This relationship is the foundation for helping microboard members to conduct themselves and ensure they're following the next set of guiding principles. The second principle is that all people are assumed to have the capacity for self-determination. The capacity will be acknowledged, respected, and demonstrated in all of the dealings of the microboard. Sometimes the person at the center has non-traditional methods of communication, but because of the relationship that the microboard members have with them, they know when a certain gesture or movement, vocalization, or perhaps eye gaze has meaning, and they use that knowledge to make sure the individual is able to exercise their capacity for self-determination. The third principle is an extension of the previous two, in that all planning and decisions made by a microboard will demonstrate regard for that person's safety, comfort, and dignity, with consistent respect for their needs, wishes, interests, and strengths. The fourth principle ensures that the microboard members will act as sponsors to the community, ensuring that the person at the center participates in community activities with their microboard members in ways that make sense for all involved. Building off of shared interests and strengths, this could mean engagements via social events, family functions, or wider community participation. We know that everyone has something to contribute in their own way, and the fifth principle ensures that people at the center of microboards have the opportunity to both receive from and give to their community, as well as with other individuals in their network. Again, this is highly individualized and tailored to the strengths and interests of the person at the center of each microboard. The last principle is that all microboard members should come onto that microboard and conduct their board business in the spirit of mutual respect, cooperation, and collaboration. There will be differing opinions and conflicting viewpoints, and this can create new and wonderful opportunities for all involved. But recognizing that the board members can have differences, but come together in a constructive way for what's best for the person, putting aside their personal biases and differences is really important to ensure that the microboard is reaching its full potential. When looking at the microboard members, there's really only a few requirements of who to ask to sit on a microboard. There has to be at least 5 people and a maximum of 11 that sit on the board, and they have to have a relationship with the person with a disability. Beyond that, they do have to be over 16 years old, but can be any age above that. Microboard members can live in any community, province, or country as long as they can connect in virtually or in person as needed. Although having at least a few people that do reside in the community of the person at the center is usually a good idea. Each microboard member should be taking on a piece of the work. The idea is that each member is actively involved and active in the person's life. Those members then come together and they can serve a number of roles depending on what the person at the center needs, requests, or wants. Each microboard works a little bit differently. There's lots of flexibility built into the model to ensure that the microboard is serving the person at the center in ways that make sense for them, as directed by the individual or by those that know them because of that relationship. The board members can then help the individual plan their life, help them set and achieve their goals, brainstorm and problem solve with the person, help advocate for what is needed, ensure they are connecting with their family, friends, and wider community in ways that make sense for everybody involved, and socialize both as a group and one-on-one with the person at the center. If the microboard chooses to access available funding, the microboard members then also become responsible for managing those funds and creating customized services. They monitor the services that are created and ensure they are doing any required reporting to their funders and any other relevant agencies. For the microboards that do access funding, the group as a whole is responsible for planning the services. And again, this looks a little bit different for everybody depending on what the needs are. Sometimes it's going to be contracting with respite or home share providers. Most of the time it is becoming the employer of record and hiring support staff. The microboard is responsible for finding and training any workers and monitoring them to ensure that the services are going well. Managing the funding allows the microboard to shift supports if needs change and make sure that all the paid services in that person's lives are meeting their needs. Each microboard member needs to be aware of the contract and how the supports are run, but often there will be key members that take on heavier roles in different areas, and those roles can shift and change over time as needs dictate. Microboards can serve a person across the lifespan, and many families choose them because of the succession planning and support built into the model. Individualized funding is often compared and confused with microboards, but it is actually an entirely separate payment option and only available to adults served through Community Living British Columbia, or CLBC. I'm going to start with a very quick overview video of individualized funding.
What is individualized funding? Individualized funding is a payment option through Community Living British Columbia, or CLBC. It is intended to create new services for the individual tailored to their unique needs and wants. Individualized funding cannot be used to purchase existing services. There are 2 streams of individualized funding: host agency and direct payment. With both options, the individual designates someone to be their agent, or they can be their own agent. With the host agency option, the agent chooses an agency to manage the services. The agency receives the funds from CLBC to hire staff to provide supports. With direct payment, the agent takes on the CLBC contract themselves. They are the one responsible for finding, hiring, and managing staff. Whoever is managing the contract, either the host agency or the agent, is responsible for reporting to CLBC, monitoring the services, and ensuring they are following the applicable legislation. If you want to learn more about individualized funding and which option would be best for you, Bella's staff are available to assist.
Individualized funding is not a program, but rather it is a way to receive the funds that you are already eligible for from CLBC. With this option, you can either designate an agency called the host agency or a person called the agent to receive the funds and create customized and individualized supports. Individualized funding provides opportunities for individuals and families of adults to implement creative, flexible, and innovative services. Supports do not necessarily always have to be one-on-one. Anyone with self-directed funds via individualized funding or microboard can come together with another person or family with self-directed funding to create something new and collaborative as a way of extending their supports. There are two options under the individualized funding umbrella: direct funding and host agency. With direct funding, the funds are provided directly to the agent, who is the person designated by the person with a disability to be the primary contact. The agent then receives the funds directly and is responsible for employing or contracting with support workers. The agent does have to use the guidelines from WorkSafe BC, Employment Standards, and the Canada Revenue Agency to determine if they are hiring employees or contractors, but the CLBC policy does allow for staff to be hired as either once that determination has been made. It is important to note that while one person receives and manages those funds all on their own, these funds are not taxable to the agent and do not need to be declared on their personal tax returns. Direct funding is further broken down into standard and simplified contracts, which will be detailed more on the next slide. With host agency funding, the individual chooses an agency off of the approved host agency service provider list. CLBC will often start by giving the person and their family 3 options of agencies within their community that they can connect with to find the best fit. After interviewing and selecting an agency, in this option, the agency is the one who receives and manages the funding, making them the employer and the one who finds, trains, and manages the support workers. The agency is also responsible for maintaining separate financial records for each contract that it holds under individualized funding and submitting those to both the agent and CLBC. The agency will also have a contract with the agent that delineates what pieces the agent wants to be involved in and how involved they want to be. As an example, often agents will want to take part in the interview process, so this would be written into and agreed upon in the contract before they start their relationship. The 2 options for direct funding are simplified, which usually includes many of the respite-only contracts or any other contracts that are under $10,000 a year. Anything over that mark would then become a standard contract. Simplified contracts are just that, simplified. They do not require an individualized support plan or a separate bank account, although we do always still recommend having a separate bank account to attract those funds. And the compliance reports for the simplified contracts are only required every 6 months. The process under a simplified contract to become an agent is also much easier with very few barriers. It is important to note that just because an agent holds a simplified contract, especially when it's respite only, again, it doesn't automatically mean that they are hiring contractors. Reading through the resources that are available to make the determination if staff or employees or contractors is recommended regardless of the funding amount. With the standard agreements, the process to become an agent is a bit more complex. The agent must hold the legal authority to represent the individual, either through a representation agreement or a committeeship. They must also be able to prove that the person with a disability has the Canada Revenue Agency approval to claim the disability tax credit. If the contract is over $25,000 per year, they then also have to do a credit check via CLBC head office. Once the agent has been approved through those processes, then they must open a separate bank account in their name to receive the CLBC funds. And they do have to submit a report once a month online in order to track how the funds are being spent. Again, with this option, the agent is the one responsible for finding and hiring their employees or contractors, and they do need to make that determination before they hire staff to make sure they're doing things correctly. For the folks that are employers, either microboards or individualized funding agents, there are some responsibilities that are required. Employers do have to ensure that they're completing payroll at least twice a month for their employees, which is an employment standards regulation. Some will choose to take this on themselves, but you do have the option of hiring a bookkeeper, accountant, or a payroll company with the funds that you receive from CLBC. Tracking how the funds are spent and ensuring that any required reports are filed is another responsibility of the employer. Microboards and individualized funding contracts do vary slightly in what is required, so being familiar with your contract and its expectations is important. With government funding, there are always going to be policies and standards that have to be followed, and these again will be in the contract given to you by the staff at the funding ministry that's supporting you. But again, VELA staff can also help you to understand what these are and what they mean. And finally, as an employer, you do need to be very aware of and follow any of the relevant government legislation and regulations from agencies such as the Canada Revenue Agency, Employment Standards, and WorkSafe BC. Both microboards and individualized funding can be wonderful options for the people who want to take control of their lives and control of the paid services in their lives, but it can be really overwhelming, which is where VELA and our staff may come in. VELA staff can help as much or as little as needed upon request throughout the process. We rely on families to tell us when they need help. We often begin by helping families to explore all of the options that are available to them, even beyond microboards and individualized funding, and then assisting them to develop a plan. Sometimes this is formalized in the form of a path or another planning tool, but sometimes it's also a bit less formal. We meet people where they are at and let them tell us how they want to proceed. We often work alongside families in putting together plans and budgets for their funders and then helping them to negotiate and implement their contracts. For the families that do access funding, we provide mentoring around how to be an employer and how to connect with the relevant government agencies, such as the CRA, WorkSafe, and Employment Standards. And we can also help with the finer details of being an employer. We have many resources, samples, videos, documents around the required steps, such as setting up bank accounts, finding and hiring staff, finding a payroll company, and all the other little bits that a lot of people aren't going to know how to do to begin with. And finally, I will leave you with the options to connect with us as an organization. We are always happy to hear from anyone who wants to learn more about microboards or individualized funding or our organization. When you connect with us, we can also connect you directly with one of our facilitators in your region to further explore the options and assist folks one-on-one.
We're coming to you from Disability Alliance BC. My name is Shirari Sarimi, and I am the Advocacy Access Program Manager. At Disability Alliance BC, we champion disability issues through direct service, community partnerships, advocacy, research, and publications. We do want to acknowledge that Disability Alliance BC is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. We honor those territories and the Indigenous people who inhabit this land that we are on. For more information about Disability Alliance BC and the services that we offer, you can take a look at our website, disabilityalliancebc.org, where we share lots of different information about different disability benefits and things that someone could be eligible for if they have a disability. So today we're going to be talking about the Persons with Disability Designation, or PWD, the bus pass benefit, the camping benefit, the fuel tax refund, the disability tax credit, as well as a little bit on the registered disability savings plan. So first, I'm going to be talking about the Persons with Disability Designation, also known as PWD, which is provided provincially by the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction. In order to qualify for PWD, someone has to be a resident of BC and a Canadian citizen, and can't be leaving the province for more than 30 days in a calendar year. These eligibility requirements do have exceptions, such as someone who has applied under refugee status in Canada. The next qualification is that you have to be over the age of 18, but under the age of 65 in order to apply for and be approved for disability benefits. The only exception to this age gap rule is for if some reason someone is perhaps a newcomer to Canada or for whatever other reason doesn't qualify for old age security, the guaranteed income supplement, or CPP retirement benefits. If that is the case and they are over the age of 65, then they can also apply for PWD if they have a disability. The third qualification is that you have to have a severe disability that's expected to last for 2 or more years in order to qualify for this benefit. Now, this can be a physical or a mental health related disability. It's more about the level of restrictions rather than the actual type of disability itself, which brings us to the fourth qualifications, which is that your disability has to cause significant restrictions to your ability to perform activities of daily living. So some activities of daily living would include things like self-care tasks, meal preparation, financial management, household chores, shopping, and social functioning, as well as tasks such as mobility. An indication that you might qualify are things like if you use an assistive device for help with performing these daily living activities, help from another person with these daily living activities, or require the use of an assistance animal. So if you require ongoing help from one of these three things in order to perform those daily living activities. Now, PWD is administered through the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, which also administers programs like the Income Assistance Program. And so therefore, in order to qualify for PWD benefits, you do have to meet the income and asset testing required from this program. So what that means is your income and the income of your family unit, so that's your spouse or common law partner, can't exceed the rate of disability that you would get if you were on PWD. Your family unit also can't exceed the asset limit, which currently is $100,000 for people applying for PWD. So in order to qualify for PWD, you do have to apply, and it's kind of a two-step program. The first is to apply for income assistance through the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, and that's to provide financial information to the ministry and for them to check that you qualify for the program from a financial sense. The next step, once that application has gone in, is to request a PWD application booklet. This booklet comes in 3 sections. Section 1 is the applicant information, where the person applying is expected to give information about their disability. Section 2 is the medical report, in which the medical professional of that person is expected to fill out information related to their disability. And then section 3 is an assessor's report, where either the same medical professional who did section 2 can fill out section 3, or it can be another prescribed professional that the ministry kind of would accept for this portion of the form. At Disability Alliance BC, we are able to help through this entire application package, so you can always reach out to us for further assistance with this form. Other things to know, as I mentioned earlier, is that you have to have assets less than $100,000, not including someone's primary residence and the vehicle that they're driving on a daily basis, but things like cash, investments, or other property other than the primary residence would count towards this $100,000 asset limit. Other exemptions would be something like an RDSP or a qualified trust. Now, when someone is approved for PWD, one of the benefits that they get is known as the annualized earnings exemption, which means that they are allowed to work and earn employment income without having it clawed back from their disability benefits up to a certain amount. So currently for a single person, it's $15,000, $18,000 for a couple where only one person has PWD, and $30,000 for a couple where both people have PWD. It's important to know that the annualized earnings exemption takes into account the entire family unit's income, so both the applicant and their spouse or common law partner's income. Obviously, what is the benefit of being on PWD? Main one is that it comes with a monthly income for support and shelter. So a single person without dependents is eligible for a maximum support and shelter amount of $1,358.50 currently. And then this rate will go up depending on if someone has a spouse or common law partner, or if they have any children. Also included once you are approved for PWD benefits is a transportation supplement. So what this means is a bus pass for TransLink BC and BC Transit served communities. So this will be granted to someone who has been approved for PWD benefits. If they don't wish to have the bus pass, they can instead do $52 a month cash as a supplement for things like insurance or gas. They also come with health benefits and other supplements, which I'll briefly go over. So things like MSP coverage, extended medical therapy, fair pharmacare, additional things that someone could apply for, such as a diet supplement or a monthly nutritional supplement. There's also dental coverage and optical coverage, as well as other things that can be covered, such as medical transportation or alcohol and drug treatment counseling. Another benefit that comes from someone being on PWD benefits is known as the camping benefit. So what happens is if someone is on PWD, they are entitled to exemption from paying front country camping fees and second vehicle fees for a single campsite or 1/2 of a double site per night. And in order to get this benefit, all someone needs to do is go to their local ministry office and obtain a release of information form from the ministry. Once they have arrived at the campground, they just need to show the park operator the release of information form, and then a second piece of ID, such as like a driver's license or a services card, just to match that form with who they are. And in order to kind of book a campsite, they have to choose the SSCFE rate when they are booking in order to kind of get this coverage. And then it's important to note that the fee exemption only applies to camping fees. So it doesn't apply to reservation charges or additional services, such as like firewood or anything like that that might be offered at that campsite. Okay, next I'm going to pass it over to my colleague who will be explaining the BC Fuel Tax Refund Program.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cynthia Min, and I'm director of 2 programs at Disability Alliance BC, the Tax Aid Program and the Access RDSP Program. For those with PWD, you might want to look into the BC Fuel Tax Refund Program, which we at the Tax Aid program help with. What is it? In BC, you must pay taxes when pumping your gas. Now, people with disabilities can claim a refund up to $500 a year on the fuel tax they pay in the province if they apply for this fuel tax refund program. To apply, you have to be 16 years or older. You also have to be registered as an owner or a leaser of a vehicle or have ownership interest to a vehicle. You also have to have at least one qualifying disability. Those with PWD designation will qualify without a medical note, but those without PWD can also apply if they receive a medical note from their doctor that demonstrates that they're severely impaired to the degree that they are unable or have difficulty using public transit. The way you get this refund is you would first apply for the fuel tax refund program, which you can do online through eTax BC or by mail. Once you receive a confirmation letter, you will also receive a registration number that you can then put onto your application when you apply for your refund for the fuel that you pay. What you want to do is keep all your fuel receipts and then apply for the refund. Some things to keep in mind when you're applying for a refund. You want to be able to mail in your form and all the receipts. Refund applications must be submitted to the ministry within 4 years of the date that the tax was paid. This means that if you're applying for the first time, then you can apply for a refund up to 4 years before you apply for the program. You can apply for the refund again once each year, as long as you're requesting a refund for $10 or more. The first time you apply, if you didn't save your receipts, you can also provide other forms of proof. These are credit and debit card statements, account statements, or signed statements that show how much fuel you purchased during the years that you want to apply for. Remember that this is a one-time exemption, so you can only do this the first time you apply. For the years subsequent, you want to be able to show your fuel receipts every time you purchase at the fuel station. So pre-authorized payments will not suffice. A very nice benefit of applying for the fuel tax refund program is that even if you don't apply for a fuel tax refund, once you receive your confirmation letter for the fuel tax refund program, you can also apply with ICBC for a 25% discount off their basic auto plan. This benefit applies for electric vehicles as well. So you don't have to be an owner of a vehicle that uses fuel in order to apply for the program. What you would have to do is take to your local auto plan broker your registration letter or your fuel tax refund program for persons with disability account number, your owner certificate of insurance, and your vehicle license documents. Okay, the next benefit that I'll be talking about is the disability tax credit. What is the DTC? The DTC is a non-refundable tax credit that helps reduce the taxes that you owe. What does this mean? It means when you file your taxes every year, you get a portion of the disability amount that's based on the personal income tax that you pay. In 2021, this amount was $8,662. If you enter this amount onto the taxes that you pay, you get a portion of it back depending on how much income tax you pay. If you don't pay any income tax, then you won't get money back as a refund. But some things to keep in mind, you can get a refund for some of the taxes that you pay for up to 10 years before you apply. Another thing to keep in mind is that if you do not owe any income tax, but you have a caregiver, a family member who helps pay for food, shelter, and clothing, any unused credit amounts can be transferred to an eligible caregiver to help reduce the taxes that they pay. Even if you don't pay any income tax, it is really important to apply for the DTC because it helps you access other helpful benefits. These benefits include the Canada Workers Benefit with a disability supplement on top. For those who already have the Canada Child Benefit, if your child has a DTC, you can get a disability supplement on top of that. Certain medical expenses can also be claimed with the DTC. Those with the DTC can also claim a disability support deduction to help with anything that they need for work or school. Caregiver credit, home buyer's amount for those who are first-time home buyers or continue to purchase homes. The home accessibility tax credit, would be eligible for qualified disability trust status. For disability trust can also have a preferred beneficiary election option. Certain education related benefits, such as the $500 scholarship exemption, can also be accessed through the DTC, and the registered disability savings plan. So even if you don't pay any income tax, it's important to access because you might be able to access other reductions in the things that you pay. Who is eligible for the disability tax credit? The DTC has no age restrictions. It doesn't have to do with whether or not someone can work or go to school, and it doesn't depend on your income or assets. So you can be going to work or going to school, or you can make no income at all. You can have a very high income and asset, or you can have no income and asset and still benefit. To apply, you must have a SIN number, and you must have severe and prolonged medical impairments. Who is eligible for the DTC? To apply, I think I actually started with just to apply. Okay. To apply, applicants must have a SIN number and a severe and prolonged impairment. The impairment can be mental or physical. Prolonged means that the impairment has lasted or is expected to last at least 1 year. A severe impairment means the following three things. Either someone has a marked restriction, they're very restricted in one basic activity of daily living, which means they cannot do the activity, or they need a lot of help to do the activity, or it takes them a lot longer to do the activity than people their age without their restrictions. The second way that someone can qualify is if someone is restricted a little less, but in 2 or more of the activities. The cumulative effect of all their restrictions is equal to a marked restriction. And the third way that someone can qualify is if they're in need of therapy that keeps them alive and also takes up a lot of time. So I mentioned that someone might have to be markedly restricted or restricted cumulatively in some basic activities of daily living. These activities include vision, speaking, feeding, which means eating or making food, hearing, walking, eliminating, dressing, and mental functions. So remember that someone has to be markedly restricted in one basic activity or restricted a little less, but in 2 or more of these activities. How to apply. There are 2 ways to apply for the DTC. You can either do so through paper, which means you would fill out the first section of the form, take your form to the specialist or a medical practitioner, and then send the completed form to the CRA by mail or online. There's also a digital form that's available for medical practitioners. They can access this digital form online. They fill out their section, print out the section that you have to fill out. You fill out the rest of the section, and you send in the completed form to the CRA by mail or online. Unlike other disability benefits, the DTC can be completed by different health practitioners. Medical doctors and nurse practitioners can certify all sections of the form, but if you have a medical condition that is very specialized, you can get your DTC submitted with the help of other medical practitioners. For example, if you have restrictions in vision, you can get the DTC certified by an optometrist. If you have restrictions in walking, feeding, and dressing, or the cumulative effects of all three, you can get your DTC certified by an occupational therapist. For those with restrictions in mental functioning, you can get your DTC certified by a psychologist. There's no preferred medical professional, so it is good to talk to someone that you feel very familiar with. With the disability tax credit, you can get what's called the Registered Disability Savings Plan. What is the RDSP? The RDSP was created by the federal government as a long-term savings plan for people with disabilities and their families. It can help people even if you can't put any money into the plan, and it won't affect other disability benefits. You might recall that those who have more assets than what is allowed for under PWD might use the RDSP as a way to have these assets be exempt from their disability benefits. Who qualifies for the RDSP? Well, to be eligible, someone must be a Canadian resident, must have a social insurance number, and be approved for the disability tax credit, which is why getting the DTC is really important. There are some age criteria for this benefit. You must open the RDSP by December 31st of the year that you turn 59. But in order to get some of the best benefits and grants and bonds from the government, you have to open the RDSP by December 31st of the year you turn 49 in order to qualify for this free money. How much money are we talking? Well, if you're under 49, you can access up to $90,000 in government bonds and matching grants. The way that the grants work is that they're matching grants. So you contribute some money and you can get some money back from the government. The way that the bonds work is that you don't even have to put any money into the RDSP in order to get them. If you earn under a certain amount, under $32,000, you can get $1,000 every year without even applying. If you earn between $32,000 and $45,000, you can get partial bonds. Thank you so much for being with us today. We know that that's a lot of information, but we've also included some helpful tools for you to navigate through all of the benefits that we talked about today. We have some help sheets that you can access on our website. We also have created some tools to help you along the way for some of the specific benefits. We have a disability tax credit online tool to prepare for appointments with health practitioners. We also have a guide for the DTC and RDSP for newcomers with disabilities. We have a registered disability savings plan calculator that our partners at Plan Institute have developed to help you understand how much you can be earning in that savings plan. And we also have partnered with Prosper Canada to develop a disability benefits wayfinder that is a how-to guide on the PWD, CPPD, DTC, and RDSP. Thank you again. And if you'd like to contact us, you can always contact us by email at advocacy@disabilityalliancebc.org, by phone at 604-872-1278, or toll free at 1-800-663-1278, and online at disabilityalliancebc.org.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us and the Family Support Institute of BC for today's presentation. My name is Kyer, and I am with an organization called Plan Institute, which is a member of the Access RDSP partnership, along with Disability Alliance BC and the BC Aboriginal Network on Disability Society. Today, we'll be presenting about the Registered Disability Savings Plan, which is a financial security plan for people with disabilities. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few things. First, I'd like to acknowledge that our presenters gratefully work and live on the traditional and unceded territories of the Coast Salish, Tsawwassen, Stalo, Chemainus, and Musqueam peoples. We recognize that territorial acknowledgements are one very small part of dismantling colonial worldviews, and we encourage everyone to take a few moments to think of other ways you can enact decolonization. Please note that all information provided through this presentation is intended for educational purposes only and is not legal, tax, investment, financial, medical, or other professional advice and should not be understood as a recommendation for any particular course of action. Individuals should consult with a personal tax advisor, accountant, legal, or financial professional before taking any action based upon the information contained in this presentation. So who are we? Plan Institute is a national nonprofit organization based in the Lower Mainland, BC, that was created with the goal of improving the lives of people with disabilities. A lot of this work is done through our education and learning initiatives, as well as our partnerships and advocacy work that we engage in. As I mentioned earlier, we're part of a partnership called Access RDSP, along with BC Aboriginal Network on Disability Society, or BCANS, and Disability Alliance BC, or DABC. This partnership was created to encourage financial security for people living with a disability through the uptake of the RDSP. Along with the presentations like the one we're doing today, we aim to provide as much free support as possible around the RDSP and the disability tax credit to support people with their disability planning journey. And your presenters today will be myself and my colleague Liz Cairns, who is also from Plan Institute. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Kyer. It's pronounced like fire with a K, and I am the project coordinator here at Plan Institute. For those who are unable to see me, I am an Asian male with long black hair that's tied into a bun, and I'm wearing a green shirt, and my pronouns are he, him. And now I will let my colleague Liz introduce himself.
Thanks, Kyer. Yeah, so my name is Liz, and I'm one of the project managers we have at Plan Institute. I've been with the organization for quite a few years now, and a big part of my work is the Access RDSP partnership, as well as our disability planning helpline service. My pronouns are they, them, and for those of you who may not be able to see me, I'm a Caucasian non-binary person with, well, pretty long pink, purple, green, and blue hair, and I'm wearing a black t-shirt. So for the presentation today, we're going to be covering very briefly a little bit of an overview of what the RDSP is, including who qualifies, some of the benefits of the plan, contributions to the RDSP, a tiny bit about withdrawals, and then we'll end with a summary of the presentation and provide some additional resources and support. So what is the RDSP? The RDSP is a long-term investment savings plan that was designed by the federal government, almost like a pension replacement for people with disabilities. It works really similarly to a registered education savings plan in that it will receive some contributions from the government. However, the RDSP is definitely the most advantageous of any registered plan. In practice, though, it works more similarly to a registered retirement savings plan and is really meant to be accessed once the beneficiary or the person with the disability turns 60. So one of the biggest benefits of the RDSP is that it does not affect any federal benefits and most provincial or territorial benefits as well. In BC, it is completely exempt, meaning that somebody could still be receiving income assistance, BC housing, and other disability support programs while still being able to save money in their RDSP. With the RDSP, you can receive up to $90,000 in government contributions, deposit up to $200,000, and have unlimited investment income as well. In order to open an RDSP, there's a few qualifying criteria that you have to meet. So first, you must be a resident of Canada. You must hold a valid social insurance number. This could be temporary or permanent as long as it's valid. And you must have the disability tax credit. Now, the disability tax credit is not going to be touched on in this presentation, but we do offer a lot of support around that, as well as having a ton of resources. So we encourage you to reach out afterwards. As well, there are some age restrictions with the RDSP. So those, up to $90,000 in government grants and bonds, that can only be received up until the end of the year that the person with the disability or beneficiary turns 49. However, the RDSP itself can be opened up until the end of the year that somebody turns 59, and you can still make contributions into the plan at that point. Now, Kyer is going to go over one of the biggest reasons to open an RDSP, getting that free money from the federal government.
Thanks, Liz. Just like Liz said, one of the main draws of opening up an RDSP is that you may be eligible to claim up to $90,000 in government grants and bonds. You can even claim these retroactively going back up to 10 years. However, grants and bonds can only be claimed up until the end of the year a beneficiary would turn 49. And then in the next couple of slides, I'll be going over how much in grants and bonds your RDSP could receive, which for any 1 year is determined by the 2 previous years' income tax. The first type of government contribution is called the Canada Disability Savings Grant. The grant is a contributions matching program whereby, depending on your income level, the federal government can give up to $3,500 a year and up to $70,000 in total of your lifetime. As I mentioned earlier, it's depending on the income level. And so if you earn under what's deemed the high income threshold, which for 2022 is roughly around 100,000, the government will do a 3-to-1 matching on the first 500 you put into your RDSP, and 2-to-1 matching on the next 1,000. Meanwhile, if you earn over that threshold, or if you missed filing your income tax, the government will only do a 1-to-1 matching of up to $1,000. So remember to file your taxes on time every year if you want to ensure you get the most out of the government grants. The second type of government contribution is called the Canada Disability Savings Bond, which is available for people with low to moderate income. The full bond amount for a year is $1,000, and you can be eligible for up to $20,000 in total over your lifetime. The bond is solely dependent on your income level and will be deposited into the RDSP automatically every year, regardless of whether you have put in any of your own personal contributions. If your income is under the low income threshold, which for 2022 is roughly around $32,000, you'll receive the full $1,000 bond. Meanwhile, if you make more than that, but are under the median income level, which is around $50,000, you'll receive a prorated amount of that $1,000. And if you make more than that, you are considered high income and won't be eligible to receive it. One additional benefit of the grants and bonds is that they can be claimed retroactively going back up to 10 years. This is really helpful, for instance, if you were to receive a disability tax credit approval, which is backdated, or if you have any unclaimed grants and bonds in the last 10 years. However, please note that you can, even while retroactively claiming grants and bonds, you can only claim them up until the end of the year you turn 49. The government has a limit to how much grants and bonds can be deposited into an RDSP in any year. For the bond, that limit is $11,000, whereas for the grant, you can claim up to $10,500 per year. So this means that while claiming retroactive bonds can be done in a single year, claiming all retroactive grants may take several years. So for retroactive bonds, once you gain eligibility for them, they will be deposited into your RDSP automatically. Retroactive grants, however, require you to make the necessary contributions so that the government can deposit matching grants. The amount you should contribute is calculated based on your previous year's income levels and can get a bit complicated, but don't worry, Employment and Social Development Canada, or ESDC, which is the government body that administers the grant, they'll send you a letter every year to let you know the right amount to put into your RDSP. As I mentioned earlier, grants and bonds can only be claimed up until the end of a calendar year. A beneficiary will turn 49. So you might be asking, what are the advantages then of opening up an RDSP if you were already in your 50s and not eligible to claim any of those government contributions? Well, first of all, the RDSP is considered an exempt asset for both federal and BC provincial disability benefits. Similarly, any third-party contributions into an RDSP or withdrawals from an RDSP are considered exempt income. So what that means is the RDSP can be a great way to put aside your savings or invest your savings and receive something like a large payout, like a settlement or an inheritance. And you can put that into your RDSP without it having any effect on your disability benefits, because no matter how much you put in or how much the RDSP grows, it'll always be considered an exempt asset. The other reason why you should open an RDSP in your 50s is because there's no government grants and bonds with it inside the RDSP, you'll be allowed a lot more flexibility on when and how much you can withdraw from the RDSP. And now that we've gone over a lot of the benefits of opening up an RDSP, I'd like to talk about the process of setting one up. So when you want to set up an RDSP, one of the first things you'll have to specify is who will be the RDSP holder. An RDSP holder is a person who will manage the RDSP, will work closely with the financial institution or a representative. They'll choose and approve the investment and also supervise the RDSP withdrawals. For minors, the RDSP holder can either be a parent or a legal guardian, and they can also stay on as an RDSP co-holder once the minor reaches adulthood. As for adults, on the other hand, the holder and the beneficiary can be the same person, except in the case where the beneficiary's contractual competency is in question. And if that is the case, the RDSP holder will need to be someone other than the beneficiary. And now my colleague Bliss will go over how you actually go about opening up the RDSP.
Thanks for that, Kyer. So the first step in setting up an RDSP and actually opening the account is deciding what financial institution or professional you would like to work with. To help you with this, you can always ask someone you trust for recommendations, or you can ask to talk to a financial institution's representative to see if they would be the right fit for your needs and financial goals. Pretty much all financial institutions at this point offer the RDSP, including banks, credit unions, wealth management firms, stock brokerage firms, and independent financial companies. So there are lots of options that are out there. Some things to take into consideration when looking at these different options include the financial institutions management fees for the RDSP, what policies and options they offer in terms of RDSP withdrawals, what investment options they offer in your portfolio, and how accessible they are to you. This could both be in terms of their ability for you to actually meet with a financial professional and those physical accessibility options, but it could also relate to how you're able to access the account information and to go about making deposits and withdrawals from the account. So once you've chosen a financial institution, that's pretty much, one of the hardest processes. And at that point, you may need to set up an appointment, usually one or two. If it's a large bank, for example, they may just have one designated call center to open up the RDSP. But, for some, for example, independent financial companies, they may be able to actually come to your home and do all of the paperwork there. Set aside probably 30 to 60 minutes for the first appointment, maybe 15 to 30 for the next one. You'll have some application forms that you need to fill out, and then they'll submit everything into their own system and to the federal government to make sure that it is all set up well. So once the RDSP is set up, it's now ready to start receiving contributions. Generally, the only person who can approve those contributions to the RDSP is the holder. So you may need to get written permission if you're, say, another family member, maybe a friend, maybe an employer even, someone who just wants to make a contribution. There's no annual limit to how much money you can deposit into the RDSP, just that lifetime maximum of $200,000. For example, if you were someone that maybe got an inheritance, or you received a large sum of money from a settlement, maybe you had close to that $200,000. If you're the person with the disability and you're still under the age of 49, may not be best to deposit all of that money in at once, just because if you use up that contribution room, you can't deposit more, and those grants require contributions every year. So it'll be different depending on what situation you have. And that $200,000 contribution limit doesn't include that up to $90,000 in grants and bonds. And so you could have potentially almost $300,000 in contributions from yourself or the government, and unlimited investment income. And we've actually seen recently that someone who's opened their RDSP in 2008 now has over $500,000 in the account based on some investment decisions that they were able to make and being able to deposit a larger sum. So now that you've opened the RDSP, you've made and received contributions, you've watched your investments grow, how do you access the money within the RDSP? So I'm going to cover this very briefly. We do have an RDSP level 2 webinar that runs once every month, alternating between 10 a.m. and 7 p.m. usually, and that covers withdrawals in much more detail. But basically, in short, there's the DAP, or the Disability Assistance Payment, and the LDAP, which is the Lifetime Disability Assistance Payment. They're pretty much the same thing in terms of what the withdrawal is made up of. However, the LDAP is the one that's required at all financial institutions. That withdrawal is what is regulated within the plan. They must start by the end of the year the beneficiary turns 60, and once they're started, they can't be stopped. And it works out so that the RDSP will be paid out in full by the end of the year the beneficiary turns 82. DAPs, on the other hand, those are really just one-time withdrawals. There's no set schedule for them. Financial institutions will have different rules around whether they allow those and if there are any fees associated. And so potentially you may be able to access those at some point as well. Now, the other thing I wanted to have you keep in mind when looking at withdrawals is that with the RDSP, if possible, you always want to aim to have more personal contributions than government contributions, even by $1. And so again, having that RDSP open in your 50s and having the ability to keep depositing money gives you a bigger chance of being able to deposit more than the government at that point. And the reason for that is if you have put in more money than the government, you have more control over withdrawals. Whereas if the government has put in more money than you, then they have more control about how withdrawals work, and there's going to be a lot more limitations on that. Basically, if the government has put in more money, you're restricted to 10% of the fair market value of the RDSP, whereas if you have more personal contributions than government, you could potentially withdraw the entire amount of the plan at one time. The only other thing that I want to touch on in terms of withdrawals is something called the 10-year or proportional repayment rule. Basically, this is a rule that was built into the RDSP to kind of disincentivize early withdrawals from the plan. Again, keeping in mind that it was designed to help folks with disabilities once they're in their retirement years. So this rule states that if the government has put any money into your RDSP within the last 10 years, that if you withdraw money from your RDSP, that those government grants that have or bonds that have been deposited in the last 10 years, those are going to be repaid at a rate of $3 for every $1 you take out. So this is quite a steep penalty. We always encourage setting up an emergency savings fund if possible. Sometimes life happens, you may be required to take out an early withdrawal and repay some of those grants and bonds. but it's still good to keep getting those as much as possible. Now, once those 10 years have passed, then withdrawals can happen as they normally would without having to repay any of those. And that's why there's those two different age limits about getting grants and bonds until the end of the year you turn 49, and withdrawals starting by the time you turn 60. So building in that automatic 10-year waiting period at that time. So I'm just going to go over a quick summary now of all the information that we learned in our very short presentation. I highly encourage you to check out any of our other webinars for a lot more information on this. But today we learned that the RDSP is a long-term savings plan for people with disabilities where residents of Canada have a social insurance number, have the disability tax credit, and are 59 years old or younger. The RDSP is a great way to save and invest money without affecting federal or any BC benefits. Once you open an RDSP, you may be eligible to receive up to $90,000 in government grants and bonds, and these can be claimed up until the end of the year that the beneficiary turns 49. There are many financial institutions that offer the RDSP. Do your research or ask someone you trust to help you choose the best financial institution or professional to work with to meet your needs and financial goals. And finally, we learned that RDSP withdrawals can be somewhat restricted, so it is best to build up some savings outside of an RDSP for emergencies. Before we end our presentation today, I just want to share some resources and where you can go for support for the RDSP. The Access RDSP Partnership has a helpline service where you can access assistance related to the RDSP and DTC. This helpline is actually meant for any disability planning topic. So even if you have questions that aren't related to the DTC and RDSP, have a call, send an email, and be connected with one of our amazing helpline advisors to go through all your questions that you have. That number is 1-844-311-7526, and the email is info@rdsp.com. Completely free to use and access. Actually, all of the services on here are free of charge. We also have rdsp.com, which is a website that we have including an RDSP step-by-step guide, a tutorial, RDSP calculator, as well as blog posts and a lot of up-to-date and current information on the RDSP and other factors. We also offer free monthly webinars that I've mentioned. You can find those on planinstitute.ca and go under our learning opportunities there. For people with disabilities in BC, the BC Disability Benefits Wayfinder tool is recently launched, and that can help you identify the disability benefits that you could be eligible for, as well as walking through step-by-step the process. And if you want to contact the government to ask more questions about the RDSP or your specific situation, you can give them a call at 1-866-204-0357. They also have a TTY service that you can access as well. And finally, if you're a person in BC that has an RDSP, you may be eligible for our one-time $150 Endowment 150 grant to help your RDSP grow. And that brings us to the end of our presentation. From Kyer, myself, Plan Institute, and the Access RDSP Partnership, I want to thank you so much for joining us, and a special thank you to Family Support Institute of BC for hosting our presentation. We hope you've been able to learn something new today, and you're always free to reach out to us at any time. We hope to hear from you soon and hope you have a great day.
Hello, I'm Bev Kissinger, and I'm going to talk to you today about making, registering, and using a representation agreement, Section 7. First of all, I want to talk about who is NIDAS. NIDAS is the agency, the nonprofit agency in BC that was established by community groups, and it's a resource for the public on representation agreements. It's province-wide, as I said. It operates also as a registry for personal planning documents. And it came from the name nest, which is a Latin term, and it's really a symbol of support, safety, and self-development. Next. The purpose of this presentation is to give you an overview, as I said, of the making, registering, and using, and we are talking about the Rep Agreement Section 7. And if you want to find more information than you're hearing here, please go to www.nidus.ca, self-help, making an RA7. Next. Basic facts about a rep agreement. It is a legal document in British Columbia. It is made voluntarily and can be made when a young person turns 19 or older. You do not need any legal professional to help you make this agreement. Next. It is not something you apply for. A representation agreement is not a service such as government benefits or a bus pass. The representation agreement, and this is so important, it belongs to the adult. It's a way that the adult can authorize the people they trust. Trust and relationship is one of the underlying values and beliefs of the representation agreement. And the representation agreement is a way trusted supporters can assist, huge word, assist the adult with making decisions and managing their affairs. Next. The representation agreement belongs to the adult. It is not anyone else's. It is not the parents, it is not the friends, it belongs to the adult. And it is a way the adult can authorize the people that they trust. It is a way trusted supporters, again, I'm going to say it, can assist the adult with making decisions and managing their affairs. Next. How does it work? Well, one parent was saying they wanted to help their son set up a registered disability savings plan. And he would have missed out on this government contribution to his financial future if they weren't able to assist him to set up that registered disability savings plan. And as one other parent has said, it lets me as the representative be at the meetings with my daughter about her services. This is a young man signing his representation agreement on his 19th birthday. And I keep this slide in here because we no longer are able to do hand over hand. It is verboten. We must find a way that the individual makes a mark by themselves on their representation agreement. Next. And NIDUS has set up a Turning 19 section on their website with specific information and resources. So you can go to www.nidus.ca and click on the link Turning 19, located below the photo of Josh and his mom, and it'll walk you through some more of the steps. So why should you make a representation agreement? Or why should your son or daughter make a representation agreement? Or why should your friend make a representation agreement? Adults have rights and responsibilities. Some adults need help to exercise those rights and make decisions. Sometimes informal support is not enough. Someone may need legal authority in order to be recognized as an advocate or a supporter for the adult. How does someone get that authority? The adult may give someone authority to help them by making a representation agreement, or a relative or friend may apply to the court and ask a judge to give them authority over the adult, which is guardianship. A representation agreement is a legal alternative to adult guardianship. And you say, what if the adult's not capable of giving someone authority? Well, they are. The Representation Agreement Action 7 is based on a new understanding about capability. It's a legal alternative to adult guardianship, as we've said, and adult guardianship is the last resort. Our Representation Agreement 7 is for all adults. How can Jared and other individuals be capable? So under Representation Agreement 7, an adult is presumed capable until it is demonstrated they are not. The way an adult communicates is not a factor in determining their capability. Some adults communicate through their behavior. Next. Under a Representation Agreement 7, there's no specific test for capability. This means no one test fits all. This also means we can look at each individual and see how they are capable of making an RA7. How can they be capable? The Representation Agreement Act says If there is a question about an adult's capability to make an RA7, all relevant factors must be considered, including, for example, does the adult demonstrate choices and preferences and express feelings of approval or disapproval of others? I can think of many ways some of the adults I know do that. Is the relationship between the adult and the representative characterized by trust? Remember, I said that's a real underlying principle of the representation agreements is the trust between the adult and their representative. Next. So what's your view of capability? You might say my daughter can't read or write, or my daughter claps her hands and nods her head when she likes something. You may say my son doesn't understand, or you may say my son recently started to pull away and hide when we go to the day program. Then I found out one of the staff pinched him for taking too long to eat. Now I understand. My brother doesn't make decisions, or my brother wears his baseball hat everywhere and gets upset when it needs to be washed. I know many of those situations. Next time I'll see if he wants to buy 2 hats of the same kind. So a new view of capability. It's really important that you understand how your relative or friend is capable to make a representation agreement. If you don't accept that they are capable, how can you expect a doctor, bank, or government agency to accept the agreement? How is your relative capable? What are some of their likes and dislikes? How do they communicate their likes and dislikes, their choices? Through sounds, gestures, behaviors, pushing away? What do they do? Okay, so now that you have a better understanding of capability, let's look at the roles. Who's involved in making representation agreement 7? So there's 3 roles assigned in a representation agreement. There's a representative, an alternate representative, and a monitor. A representative is a very different role than being a guardian, a parent, family member, or a friend. A guardian acts for the adult and does what the guardian thinks is best. A representative acts with the adult, assists the adult to figure out their options and what he or she wants to choose, helps communicate those choices to others when needed. And a representative, you could think of it like a bridge between the adult and the third parties. The first duty of a representative is to assist the adult, not do for. You assist. If necessary, a representative may also act on behalf of the adult. If you act on behalf, though, you have more legal responsibilities such as keeping detailed records. As a representative, you have legal duties to follow. It does not matter if you are also the parent, you still have these duties. And there are sheets or handouts that give you clear information on the role and duties of a representative and a monitor. And when you think of being that representative, if you are making a decision in the best interest of that individual, and you're basing it really on what you know about that individual and what makes them happy, what they don't like, what they will like, the environment they're going into, anything that you know about that individual, you are making a decision based on what you know about them and what will work for them, not what you think works. Next. Sorry. Okay. Okay, so what areas of authority need to be covered? What areas does the adult need now? What do they need help with now and in the future? So there's 4 areas that the Representation Agreement 7 can cover: minor and major health care, personal care, legal affairs, and routine financial affairs. Routine financial affairs. In September 2011, an extra safeguard was put in place in that if there is routine financial affairs involved especially, but any representation agreement now, they want to have the monitor in place to provide for that extra safety. So how do you set up an agreement? And this is outdated, so I don't really want you to use this one, please.
Okay, next one.
I just want to talk, yeah. Yeah, just go to the next one, yeah. Okay, signing and witnessing. When you making that representation agreement, the adult must make their own mark, as I mentioned. And you must arrange for 2 witnesses that watch that adult make their mark. Some, some can just make an X. Some can make a straight line. Whatever they make, those 2 witnesses are witnessing that they have put their mark on that piece of paper. And they then are signing that they saw that. The adult always signs first in front of the witnesses, and no legal professional is needed. No hand over hand, as I said. They make a mark. Now you have to sometimes get very creative, right? How they are going to make that mark. It might be that they do better standing up. So you've got the paper up on the wall and they're making their mark on the wall. It might be that they're at a table. It might be that you've got a fatter pen, anything that you know will help that individual make that mark. And if you need some ideas, you can always contact NIDIS. When you look for your witnesses, read the directions. There's a whole write-up about who can and cannot be a witness. Okay, and again, I'm just repeating that the adult signs first and the witnesses sign. And the witnesses, that's it, yeah. The witnesses, after they've signed, that they've watched the adult sign, then they have a certificate of witness to sign as well. The representative and alternate must sign the document, but do not require a witness. And they also, the representative and alternate have, and monitor have certificates they must sign. It's a huge amount of paper, but just walk through it slowly and you will get there, okay? Always, always keep your original copy. And do not let that out of the hand of either the representative or a safe place for the individual whose representation agreement it is. You can also register your copy with NIDIS when the agreement is complete. And this is really, really important to do, is that, and it's my personal belief it is, because you are then going to say who can have access to that agreement. And so if an individual arrives in emergency and nobody's with them, the staff will look up and see if there is an agreement. And if you've said that medical staff can look at that agreement, then they will know who to call and who to get there to support that individual. Okay. Okay, and it's all included. Just the registration is totally easy to follow on the NIDIS website. Just read all the notes, because Joanne, who's the ED, puts loads of little notes and helper information on what you're doing and how to set everything up. Okay, there's some other things that NIDIS also will take as registration information as well. And if there's a personal information record, it just gives more, you can keep track of paperwork and medical appointments and medications on the site so that it's all there for someone else. And when you're doing the representation agreement, I often suggest to people, if your son or daughter or the individual has a different way of communicating or has some medical issues that are really, really fragile, then add that to the representation agreement in just an extra 1 or 2 pager, so that if someone does have to interact with the individual and a person isn't there to help support the communication or the understanding of what's going on, there's a quick sheet there that someone would have that they could understand what might really upset an individual or make it really more difficult for that individual. And I'm thinking more of like an emergency department. Okay, There's also values and beliefs discussion, planning circle. Those are also on the NIDIS website.